about, hey, we are going to go um, all AI, and we're going to replace people in some cases, like Duolingo said, and Klarna said that a couple of years ago. Uh, but also recently, you've been seeing there's been a walk back, right? People are taking those words back and actually hiring more people. IBM went through the same thing, and then so it's one of those things where there is this very bold pronouncement, very strong words from leaders, and it ends up being a bit of a problem because the hype is there, but the promise is there, but the actual realization on the ground is a little bit different, and that's due to a whole lot of different reasons. And it's primarily due to a very simplistic understanding of what AI is and the value it brings and what it actually means. So we'll kind of dig into the story a little bit at this point. As most of you already know, right, I would imagine any organization is what we call a complex adaptive system. It's complex because the interactions are usually leading to some situation that has not been encountered. And that what that means is that by putting people together, you really can't expect a deterministic goal. Things emerge, goals emerge by people's interactions, and results are not always the sum of the activities. They are usually greater than that. And we'll kind of see what that means in a second. Most of the tech organizations, actually all of our tech organizations or otherwise, they're also what we call not just complex adaptive systems, they're also deeply socio-technical systems. They are a society, they are a bunch of people together doing something, having a common goal, talking, working together, delegating, debating, right, arguing, deciding. And so it also is a socio-technical system. So when you combine all of these things together, you will see why complex systems are so powerful. It's because they are adaptive, they're emergent, which means stuff happens out of the interactions that you not necessarily can predict. They're also non-linear, which is they are stochastic and they are not deterministic, but they're also highly interconnected. It's the connections that make things work. So this is why organizations are impossible to predict on the path they're going to take because stuff happens all the time. Within those organizations, when you look at a job, one key thing to remember, a job, as Manan said earlier, a job is not the sum of its tasks. If you think about your own job, just reflect for a few seconds yourself, every single person here. Think about the job description you actually got when you joined the company, when you read, when the interview happened, when you accepted the offer and started. Is the job you're doing today the same as what the job description says? Is it more or less? Is it different? I would wager 100% it's very, very different. And it's probably a lot more than what you thought was listed on the job description and what you thought the job was. So if you think about a product manager, what are they supposed to do? Write PRDs, talk to customers, uh, shout at the development team, play nice with the customer, work with the stakeholders. If you think of these as tasks, okay, a task for me today is to write a PRD. Task for me tomorrow is to talk to the customer. Task for this afternoon is talk to the development team as part of a sprint review. If you look at these as tasks, do you think we can assign an AI agent to do each of these tasks and consider that as a product manager agent, which means is a job done of the product manager by a simple agent doing these things? Or is there something else, something more to it than the tasks that they're doing? What that means is a job is a sum of its interactions, exactly like a system would be. If you have a system which has a lot of subsystems, a complex system is where the systems interact, they have relationships with each other. And this interconnectedness and the interactions are what causes the system to be emergent, is what leads the system to be adaptive. It's what leads the system to be nonlinear. And this is why a job, it's not the sum of its tasks. There are so many things behind the scenes that you do. If somebody were to ask you, hey, I want you to do a knowledge transfer of what you do to somebody, can you tell this person what you do? You probably, because of recency bias, you'll say the following things. Hey, pretty much the last 2 3 months, what you've done is what you would tell this person, because more than that, your memory may not work. Also, you may just not choose to remember because those are some time ago. But those are tasks that come again in the future, which at that point will become relevant, but they're not relevant today because they were 3 months ago. If you list those duties to somebody, they look at it and say, okay, this is this all you do? Yeah, yeah, these are the 5 6 things I do. Okay, I'm going to automate these 5 things. And then you watch the chaos unfold because what tends to happen is that all the glue, the stuff, the bridge between these little islands is what makes all this work. That's what humans do. And we'll see one more in more detail what that actually means specifically here. The most tangible thing that people do is deal with tools at work, whether it's Jira, Azure DevOps, or Cursor, Windsurf, GitHub Copilot. These are all tools. We follow methods. Okay, let's do Scrum, Kanban. There are practices, retrospectives. These are all individual things. Think of these as tasks. Think of these as atomic, discrete things that you do. Now, if you were to just isolate your work to these alone, as things change, you got to keep changing along with the tools. Today's tool is not tomorrow's favorite, right? GitHub Copilot was great when it came out. Now Cursor and Windsurf are what people prefer. Maybe in a couple of months, a year, they change completely. So tying yourself to something that is non-permanent makes you non-permanent, makes you unstable, makes you a very transient thing. So what do you do? Basically, the idea is um, don't attach yourself to specific tools. Don't be fundamentalist about a specific tool, like fanatical about a specific tool. Hey, I'm wedded to Scrum, wedded to Kanban. Instead, develop principles. What are some key principles that drive you? Example, you can always say, hey, my principle is to do the least amount of harm in every product that I build. That's a principle. So it doesn't matter what tool, what method you practice or use. If that principle stands ground, that's the foundation of what you do. Then all of these things, that's transient, ephemeral things, don't matter because you will still be grounded in your root principles. Right? So that's the idea. Basically, that's the second thing I want to kind of pass on is that develop principles instead. So again, going back to the theme of pieces and patterns, tools, methods, and practices are pieces. Those pieces may move, they may change, but the principles is what lets you build a pattern out of them. And the pattern is so strong that if you replace a tool with something else, it doesn't matter. The pattern still holds, right? This is the value of looking at the bigger picture and not worrying about the individual things. Yes, they matter. Of course, they matter. You still have to worry about foundations and windows and plumbing and shutters and and doors and hinges and stuff like that. They all matter. But if you look at those pieces alone, that doesn't make a home. Putting all the stuff together doesn't make a home. A family makes a home, right? People make a house into a home. It's the same thing. So our approach to AI should be exactly like that. Now, AI, I wouldn't classify as a tool specifically. It's much more than a tool. It's a very transformative general purpose technology, which has the same power or more than what the internet or electricity or transportation resulted in. It's a much bigger, much grander thing, in my opinion. So there are things to watch out for from that perspective. There's a temptation to do reductionist thinking. Take a problem, break it down into its parts, solve the parts. That's the third thing that I'm going to talk about is let's avoid reductionist thinking. Because every time you break a complex problem, you really actually cannot do that. But if you try to break a complex problem into smaller pieces, it may feel you're making progress every time you check something off. But even if you complete all of the items on the checklist, your actual complex problem has not been solved. Why? Because you are looking at pieces, but the pattern is missing. So you got to look at the pattern before you look at the individual pieces. What are we trying to build? What is the outcome we're looking for? What is the big goal? What is the big picture? What is the vision? Kind of work backwards, like Amazon does, for example. And so this is a really, really important thing. So we must resist the temptation to indulge in reductionist thinking. It doesn't do anybody any kind of good except for very simple problems and maybe complicated problems. You can do that. But for complex problems, which is what software is, which is what organizations are, which is what society is, or the world is economy, finance, all of these things are complex problems. They're not complicated problems. They are a dimension above complicated problems. You cannot apply simplistic thinking or reductionist thinking to solving those kind of issues. Instead, we should practice systems and critical thinking. So that means looking at the big picture, looking at the interactions, looking at the influence of one piece of thing on another and seeing what that means. So the critical thinking, deep analysis, analytical, structured thinking, scientific approach, so question or observation, research, hypothesis, experimentation, results, feedback, right? The scientific method. This is the third thing I would say for AI. This is really important. You cannot reduce AI to its pieces, which means I'm going to improve this one little workflow with AI. If you do that, you're actually sub-optimizing the whole system. Instead, AI probably will result in you rethinking your entire workflow. That's more of systems thinking. How does this entire nature of the organization change rather than how does sales change or marketing change or finance change? You all have to change it in a way. That's a pretty big piece of change we have to drive at. So what can you do today, right? What are things you should do today? Be endlessly curious. There's no end to curiosity. Curiosity is what drives all of this good stuff. And experiment. Try different things. Say, try with Gemini, Perplexity, ChatGPT, Cursor, Windsurf. Try different things out. Try agentic stuff. Try MCP. Like, but try. Doesn't mean your whole day is taken up by it. Um, just devote 30 minutes a day to experimentation, right? I don't know, 50 minutes to read a blog, 50 minutes to practice something. That's way more than if somebody who's not done something. It's way more than that. It's a big picture now. The other thing is to build knowledge. Every time you experiment, you learn something that adds to your knowledge. Every time you read a book, every time you read an article, a blog, um, watch a podcast or hear a podcast or watch a video, you're building your knowledge. You apply it, and through experience, it becomes wisdom, right? But as you build knowledge and as you apply it, it leads to better judgment. And by better judgment, people know you as somebody who can make good decisions. That means you are building your credibility, you're becoming influential. So it's not necessarily in this order, but usually kind of works in this order. So anyway, I will again talk about these things as individual pieces. Again, the same returns of the pattern. The bigger pattern is that this is what leads you to be an effective person, effective employee, effective person in your real life as well. So pieces to patterns is something that you should maybe consider as an approach to how you look at things. By not focusing on specific individual things, atomic things, discrete things, start with the big picture first. Start with where you want to go first. Then what pieces might contribute to it? What patterns should we weave to actually make those pieces into a wholesome, holistic reality? Right? That's where we need to go. So I'll stop there, and you're welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. If you want to chat, happy to always chat and trade ideas, exchange thoughts. Welcome questions at this point, I would imagine.
So I have a sort of observation slash question session. There may be more context to this because we were speaking about it in person when we met. Um, I do wonder the glue part that you were mentioning. So the pessimist in me worries about the day when there's only AI roaming around. I feel that a
Mm,
lot of the problems sort of once I got into management were people issues. So there's that saying, all problems are people problems.
mm,
But once agents and MCP and all of it takes over, then I do worry about the fact that the glue is no longer needed, if
mm,
you will, because as you were saying, it's a completely new world, new sort of protocols where it's optimized for AI. We are already sort of thinking about things such as
mm,
your front page or your sort of landing page of your product is no longer for humans. It also has to be optimized for AI agents. So it's not really a question, just a thought. If you have any sort of
yeah,
additional thoughts on that.
absolutely. So, I would say this. That's a great question, Abdul. And so foundationally, or great observation as well. So foundationally, humans are flawed, right? Humans are not perfect, which means everything we create will also be flawed by extension. You can't create perfect things from an imperfect thing. It's not possible. And so what that means is that everything we create will be a reflection of our biases, our prejudices. It'll be a reflection of our outlook on the world, which may not be the same outlook other people share, right? So the same story with AI. People roll out, oh, for this, that, for oh, is 2.5 Pro. They may all feel they're great, but then somebody else has a very different perspective. To your question about agents and MCPs filling the gaps, I think that's what you're going to say. I think that's what you were saying. Assume there's a gap. This gap is called X, right? And what if MCP comes along and fills that gap, right? Then what is the role of the human at that point? I think that's what you're saying, right? Or an agent takes over that role. So what I would say is that these things are extremely deterministic. Therefore, they have to follow rules. They have to follow guardrails. The minute something goes out of whack, a button goes out of place, it becomes a problem. It doesn't know what to do. So it's got to escalate to a human being. So at all points, a human in the loop is a critical thing. Um, just simple things like booking a ticket, right? You program an agent to book a ticket. It'll go, hey, buy me a ticket to Bali, on this date or whatever. He'll go there, do his thing. Well, the fare just went up by $50. And the agent is like, well, you have money in a credit card. I'm just going to book it. But you may actually say, as a human being, well, hold on, I have other things that I should, wanted to spend that money on. It's not worth for me to spend $50. Now, imagine if this is like symbolic programming, right? You have to give every set of rule to these things to work. But the world doesn't work according to rules. Work the world actually works according to gaps in the rules. You see what I'm saying? So all the gaps in the rules are actually what make the rules in a way. So these agents are programmed to follow rules. They're programmed to do certain things out of fear, out of guardrails, out of a sense of security. But much of the world doesn't work like that. 100% of the world is gray. There's no black or white. And this is where these systems fail. And this is exactly what leads to automation blindly becoming a source of major problems. If that helps. Abdul.
Yeah, yeah. I think a philosophical conversation,
Yeah,
but
of course it is.
the answer makes sense.
Yeah,
This
thank you.
is going to be very philosophical. Thank you so much, Shesh. This is really thought provoking, and I'm reading this book these days, same as ever, Morgan Housel. I'm
Yeah, it's a
sure you
great book.
read this
Yeah,
finance
it's a
book.
very nice book. Yeah.
And so coming back to you, it seems like you're also on that path. You're saying some things about humans do not change, about how the world operates does not change. So it'll sort of fall back in that order. And since you've read a lot, and I'm sure history too, like in the grander scheme of things, when more tools, etc., came out, what are some of the patterns, if you will, that you've seen over the longer horizon? Um, where tech came out and fewer humans could do a bigger lift.
Hmm.
Uh, and so, agriculture, I'm sure tools came out, you could create more food, but then, so are you saying that what doesn't change is that there'll be a need for humans to create other efforts? What are I guess, what are the patterns that you see on the larger horizon? And again,
Yeah.
sorry, this is very philosophical. I'm not even
No, no,
sure
no.
how.
It's not. Philosophy is reality. That we have to accept that. We can't have reality without understanding of philosophy. So it should be mandatory reading for everybody in software engineering, I think, to have a background in philosophy so they can make the right decisions, have the right judgment, especially critical thinking. So that that's a great question. It's one of those questions that people keep asking from automation perspective. Hey, if I were to do the work of 50 people, if a machine were to do the work of 50 people, what happens to those 50 people, right? What happens to them? Do they get upskilled? Do they get moved out? Um, the world has kept progressing, through steam engine, through railways, right, through electricity, through the internet, through automation, through software, through tools. Uh, it'll continue to work through AI. And so every time, I think what humans have, it's one of those things. We underestimate, right, the impact of something, or overestimate rather, right, the impact of something in the short term, and underestimate the impact of something in the long term. And so the short term, we really like start overestimating and say, oh, this is going to do this. It's not really true. In the long term, things change more than the short term. What it means is that if you look at the internet from a few years ago, the whole point, oh, all these stores are going to go away, right? I mean, all the brick and mortar stores are going to go away. All the workers in service people, automation robots will be there, the receptionists. There's a whole market which serves exactly that, which serves a personalized service, which focuses on people having the right kind of experience. So human experience to me is the big picture, the experience of human beings. And so there'll be a whole industry just serving that. In fact, there'll be labels made like made by humans, made handmade. Even today, there's a cachet for that. There's a heft to it. Something that is handmade, you actually value it more than something like machine produced, right? There's a reason for that. So I think I was reading this blog post by Sangeet Paul Chaudhary. You had actually tagged me there on LinkedIn, and I agree with that. That the sentiment in my head, he did, of course, a way more eloquent and a fantastic job of talking about that. I agree with those sentiments. Is that curation and curiosity and judgment will be the new currency. We have to. That this is why critical and systems thinking skills are much more important than knowledge of a tool because they get outdated in 5 minutes, right? It's the same story. So to answer the question, the patterns I see are people shifting to higher cerebral kind of work and more judgment curation work. And this I'll borrow again from Sangeet Paul Chaudhary because he got my ideas in such a brilliant way. I couldn't have done that. He talked about in a world of answers, the value of a question becomes more important, right? We have answers, but how to ask the right question, that is where, again, systems and critical thinking skills are important. This is where humans will keep getting better and better and better.
Do you feel any of it like over the past history? I know we came to the 5-day work week. Do you feel it'll result in, well, supposedly having more leisure time? And or do
Yeah,
you feel like it might break larger companies like
yeah,
the FANG group?
yeah,
Does
yeah.
it translate into more specialized, like
Yeah, that's a good question. I think over the short term, probably not. Again, there'll be this. I think it's going to be like this, right? You throw a rock, in the water. There's like ripples immediately, like big ripples, but they kind of stabilize over time, right? And it becomes back to normal. We're kind of going through that cycle right now. This AI is a big rock in the puddle of reality, and so there's all of these waves going on, which are affecting how we think, how we worry about our future, how we worry about our jobs, the nature of our jobs. But it'll settle down, and I think the for large companies, for any organization at this point, um, it would be, my opinion, stupid not to invest in AI, not to train people in AI. That is the future. There's no question about it. What it means is different for different people, different companies. Um, the key thing is that two things to remember, right? One is um, AI should be something that helps people, and people should not think of it as a replacement for people. The minute they start thinking that, their views become very, very problematic, because then it's about elimination, not innovation. You can't innovate by eliminating people. Makes no sense. Innovation comes from people, not systems, not machines. The second thing is that the more people invest in their own people, the more leaders, companies invest in their own people to upskill them, get them to a level of knowledge to transcend even what AI is about. Uh, then that'll be actually the better for the company, because ultimately a company is a faceless entity. It's a it doesn't have a body. It's people that make up something, right? So if there are people making the stuff up, and people are resilient, and people are creative, innovative, and have the space to do this, then AI becomes a really strong lever to kind of move big things. Otherwise, looking at people as indispensable, quote unquote, I had the word resource, and people use the word resource. What do you mean resource? You know, well, a mouse is a resource.
I'm curious if, John, Michael, Atif, Ali, Balki, do you guys agree with this lens, or is there a fun disagreement in my next 5 minutes future?
I turned on my camera to say something, and it's kind of funny you picked up on that,
Go ahead.
right? Um, I struggle with the idea of leisure time because I'm Gen X. My idea of leisure time is what am I building in the 10 to 15 hours when nobody's looking that ain't my 9 to 5, right? Um, we are still in a situation where talent matters tremendously. And as the opportunities for people will get narrower due to the displacement of unemployment created by the transition from non-AI assisted work to AI assisted work. It's going to be the same thing as what happened to the guild of book copiers when the printing press came around, right?
Yeah.
Suddenly you had all these people who are really good at writing out freaking books and copying Bibles by hand, and suddenly you could make 1,000 Bibles by putting them through the printing press, right? So we're going to see a massive displacement of workforce. That's just the nature of the machinery. It happened in the 1400s. It happened in the 1800s. It's happening right now. And what do you need to do to be successful in that world, and where do you go from there? Will we have lots of leisure time, or will people be spending that time reinventing ways to build themselves micro revenue streams? And I theorize that for the next 5 years, it's going to be the latter, as people create little mini gold rushes of ideas and put stuff into production. And I think there's going to be a near-term emphasis on what you can learn and what you can do to capitalize on that. I have this conversation with people on my team all the time about, hey, you're here for 39.5 hours a week building stuff, working on things, and we're talking about what's next for you in your career. You have this other person who's doing this, and then they take half of every Sunday, which is an initial 4 to 6 hours, to build something on their own. Sometimes I mentor people on what that side project is. Sometimes they're doing it on their own. And when the opportunities for growth come up and additional leadership roles, how are you going to decide to give a promotion to somebody who might be picking up less because they're putting in less hours and might be getting less to show for it, right? So I don't know that we are going to be seeing this rush towards leisure time until we have some understanding as to how people are going to be fed in the transition from book copiers to the typesetter world, right? And so I generally encourage people that, when sun is shining, go make hay, super farmer mentality on that type of thing. And that's why I'm doing a handful of side projects, experimenting with AI on my own time and resources, and learning interesting things, because we are experiencing sort of a generational shift, the like of which, happened: printing press, automobile, the factory, the computer, the internet, the touchscreen mobile phone. You know, the waves of transitional technologies are accelerating. And so you are going to have to invest more time staying on top of that as time moves forward to differentiate yourself and generate positive outcomes for you. So I think it will create more leisure time for people, but that's going to be a food stamps world for 60% of them.
Well, it's
Yeah.
going to be an interesting world.
Yeah.
Yep. We don't
Thank you
see
so much again, Sesh.